right, so today we are going to be doing 211 notes. We're going to be working on dot plots and bar graphs. So before we get started, please make sure that you have the 211 notes from the sub and a pencil. And once you have that, we're going to get started. Feel free to pause this at any time. Also replay parts that are still confusing to you and use this whenever you need. So first one we're going to talk about is a dot plot. So a dot plot is a way of displaying data that has an order and can be placed on a number line. So as you can see over here, we have our number line and then of numbers rolled on a die. So you can see that the number 1 was rolled 5 times, the number 2 was rolled 3 times, and so forth. So dot plots are generally used when numerous pieces of data fall on most values. So again, we're using a number line. So some examples that you could use this is the number of siblings each student has in your class, or of course the numbers rolled on a die, like you can see in the graph. And this would also work with siblings. You could put number of siblings, and we would say, okay, how many siblings do we have? How many people in the class have one sibling? And that's how many dots would go above them, and so forth. A bar graph, which I hope is review, and you've seen these before, but a bar graph is used when data falls in a category that typically has no numerical order. So the graph at the right shows that green is the favorite color of 14 students. So if we're reading that graph, we can see that green is clearly the tallest bar on there, so it has the most frequency. Okay, and always make sure you're reading your labels on your axis in your graph. All right, so that's a bar graph, and it kind of looks like a histogram, but remember a histogram has intervals. Okay, so remember those bins that we did with those frogs? This one is a little more specific. I can see how many students like red. The next one we're going to do or look at is a Venn diagram. And a Venn diagram is 2 or more overlapping circles used to show overlap between categories of data. So you may have seen these in like maybe English class, ELA, or something like that. It's used to compare two things that might have an overlap, so something in common. So it's over here on the right. So the diagram at the right shows that 7 students have both dogs and cats. So if you see this, highlight it for you. This center in the middle where the 2 circles overlap, that's going to be the things they have in common. So those 7 students have both dogs and cats because they're in the cat circle and the dog circle, as you can see. And that's where we get the overlap. 9 students have only dogs. So if we look at this again, okay, and we just look at the dog circle, 9 of them are just in that dog category. Okay, it's not part of the cat circle at all. And you can see that 10 only have cats. Again, kind of the same concept with the dogs. That 10 is only in the cat circle. It does not touch the dog piece. 3 students do not have a dog or cat. Okay, so you can see that 3 is hanging out here on the outside. It doesn't fit in either of the categories, so we just kind of have it floating around on the outside. If we wanted to kind of just look at who has a dog, we could say that 16 people has a dog. Could we count the whole circle? We didn't exclude the cats, okay? And then we could say 17 students have a cat. Okay, again, we're not saying just a cat. We're saying they just have a cat. They might have a dog as well. So this is how a Venn diagram kind of works. So normally if I didn't have a sub, we would be actually creating this dot plot, but since we have circumstances, I made this one right here that we're going to kind of read off of. So it says, which number of pets has the most occurrences in your class? Okay, so what I want you to do is go ahead and pause this video, and under A, I want you to answer the following questions. which number of pets has the most occurrences in your class? Which has the fewest? And how can you tell by looking at the dot plot? So obviously it says in your class. You're just going to use this guy up here because I'm not there to make one for class. So which number of pets has the most occurrences in the dot plot above? Which one has the fewest? And how can you tell just by looking at the dot plot? So go ahead and pause the video and answer those, and then press play when you're ready. Okay, so looking at the dot plot above, I can see that the most occurs for 2. So if this was our class data, we would say most of the students in our class has 2 pets at home. The fewest would be 5, and you can see that because that guy only has 1 dot. So that is referring to only 1 student has 5 pets at home. And then to answer that, how can you tell by looking at the dot plot? Just find the number with the tallest or shortest height, depending on what you're looking at. So again, if we were looking at which one has the most, we're looking at which one has the tallest height. And if we're looking at which one has the fewest, obviously we're going to want the shortest height. And feel free to pause this at any time if you need to write things down to make sure that you can really stay with us and focus on our notes, because your homework is due tomorrow. Your favorite words, I know. So B says, can you tell by looking at the dot plot whether anyone has the same type of pet as you? So go ahead and pause the video and look at, can you tell by looking at the dot plot whether anyone has the same type of pet? Okay, so no. A dot plot only shows the number of pets, but not the specific kind. So if I look at, okay, how many people have 1 pet at home? I can see that there's 4 people, but I don't know if those are dogs, cats, birds, turtles, rabbits, whatever they have, fish, okay? But I just know that 4 people in my class have 1 pet at home. Is there any information that is easier from looking, or to see from looking at a bar graph and the Venn diagram? So real quick, would there be any kind of information that is easier to see from looking at the bar graph and the Venn diagram? So go ahead, pause and answer that question. So bar graphs are effective for showing categories that are mutually exclusive. So what mutually exclusive means, and this is going to be a math term that you're going to want to get kind of familiar with, means they cannot happen at the same time. So if we go back up to this bar graph, okay, favorite color, if my favorite color is red, my favorite color can't also be blue. Now, pretend in this world you can't have 2 favorite colors, okay? So mutually exclusive means if my favorite color is red, I can't say that blue is my favorite color, okay? 2 things can't be happening at once. So bar graph is really good for showing things that are only fit in one category. Venn diagrams are best for visualizing information into categories that overlap. So it's a really good visual to look at information. And in Venn diagrams, you can have more than 2 circles as well. But you're also going to want to say, okay, as for this example of dogs and cats, some people have both. So it'd be useful to use a Venn diagram because those overlap and you have that ability to show that one of those things might fit into different categories. Okay, my student might have a dog and a cat. So bar graph wouldn't really work because they have one of each. Okay, so they're not just going to pick a pet at home. Okay, forget about the other. Okay, so if you feel good with the front side, you're going to go ahead and flip. And we're just going to kind of look at some data, and then knowing what we just talked about on the front side, what kind of display would work best for these types of data? So it says, given the data in the table at right, create a data display. Decide if a dot plot, bar graph, or Venn diagram would work best. So we're looking at Miss Mackenzie's class favorite color. Okay, so Miss Mackenzie, she's a teacher, and she took down the favorite color of her students. So basically what happened was she said, whose favorite color is red? And students raised their hands. Okay, and she marked down how many students liked each color. So if I'm looking at this, okay, and I look at my options, a dot plot, I don't really need a number line. A bar graph could work, because again, if I say your favorite color, I'm usually referring to just one, okay? And that shows frequency of categories. An Venn diagram, it doesn't really work because I'm not talking about any information that would overlap. So a bar graph would be our best bet to display that data, okay? And then if I was to create a bar graph, this is something that it would look like, okay? So obviously I have my axes, my X and my Y, okay? My Y is the up and down, and it's showing the frequency. So my height of my bars are going to be with how many students said their favorite color was such. Okay, so red, I can see over here in my data that she collected, 5 students said they liked the color red. So I make my bar up to 5. Okay. Orange would be 2, so I make my bar up to 2, yellow, 2, green, 4, so it's going to be a little shorter than my red one, and so forth. Okay, and now I have a good visual to see. And now remember, a bar graph worked best because our information was mutually exclusive, so we had one. These students didn't fall into several categories, just one category. And it's also super, super important. You know I'm big on labeling, so to label your axis. So this is favorite colors, and this would be the frequency, how many students fell into that. So go ahead and pause if you need to get this bar graph down. Okay, let's look at one more example. Mr. Reed surveys his class to see how many siblings his students had. Create a graph of the data he collected shown below. Decide if a dot plot or bar graph will work best. So a bar graph is more categories that aren't necessarily numbers. Like you could see the one we just made, we were dealing with colors, okay? So now that we're just working with just strictly numbers, I could use a number line to show this pretty easily, okay? So to me, a dot plot would work best because I can create a number line and then I just put up how many dots correspond with the data. So if I'm looking at my data and I wanted to create a dot plot, I want you to go ahead and try this out on your paper first. So go ahead and pause. And you can use the dot plot on the front to kind of help guide you. And see if you can create a dot plot. Okay, so when I created mine, here's what I got. Okay, oh, and you know what I forgot to do on here? I forgot to label. So let's make it number of siblings. Okay, and on a dot plot, you only need to label that bottom piece because there's not an axis going up and down. Okay, but you can see that I'm working with the numbers 0 through 5, so those are the only numbers I really included on my dot plot. I don't need to add in any more. So I just count how many times I see each number. So if I'm looking at my data and I go through and count how many zeros I have, I can see that there are 4. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I put 4 over 0. 1 has a ton. I believe it's 13. So you should have 13 dots going up because 1 appears 13 times. 2 has 7. Appears 7 times in our data set. 3 only appears twice. And 1 student only had 5 siblings. Okay, so again, just as a quick review, okay? A dot plot is best when you have, you're working with numerical data, so that means you're working with just kind of numbers. Now, if I asked how many students had siblings and I was specific with brothers or sisters, okay, a Venn diagram might work best with that if I was specifically looking at the kinds of siblings, because Venn diagram, you know, you can have both a brother and a sister, or you could have one of each, or you could be an only child and be really cool like me. And so you'd be that outside data piece, okay? So kind of really depends, what are you graphing? That's what you want to pay attention to. And then if your data falls into a category, specific category, like a favorite color or anything like that, like a favorite restaurant, one of something, you're going to want to use a bar graph, okay? So if you are good, okay, I will be here tomorrow to answer any leftover questions. But if you are good, I would like you to complete 211's homework. We are going to grade that tomorrow, so make sure you have that done. If the sub has not passed out your homework booklets, please go ask him or her to do so that you have your homework, and we are going to be grading that tomorrow. All right, be good for a sub. I miss you, and have a good day.